I survived 100 days in Calamity's impossible Zenith Seed, in which all my existing knowledge is thrown out the window. Here is everything that happened, and let the hunt for Supreme Alchemist Sirius begin. How? How's this possible? How?
Damn, boy, he's dead.
Whoa, okay, guess we're messing it up, God, no. No! I don't even know what's going on my screen. Yeah, I'm just dead. Seed is just pain. Day 1 begins like any other playthrough, gathering wood, placing my magic storage starter kit, and then I open my Calamity starter bag. So this will be my first ever live commentary for a video. I really want to try and record my live reactions throughout the series, so yeah, let's get into the playthrough. So after collecting a few more trees, I go ahead and make some Ashwood armor, giving me sweet 7 defense and other fire reduction properties. I've played the normal vanilla Zenith Seed before, and for me, the best early game strategy was by far the dome. This means constructing a secure base at spawn and gathering as many hell materials as I could. The main things I'm looking for are food drops from trees, which will help me with starvation. A safety box was important, as once my NPCs died, the lack of villagers would trigger mobs to start flooding my spawn point, which isn't going to be fun. Anyways, as I'm mining trees, it's important to lay down some ground rules. These are all the mods I'll be using, with main quality of life mods being Fargo's, only for arena building and infinite buffs at 30 stacks, and Alchemist NPC, for buying Calamity/vanilla potions. The Alchemist NPC potions on the other hand, were off limits, just because I find them quite OP. This playthrough will also be classless, as I'll need to have the strongest gear for a particular boss, and this is where my knowledge of Calamity kinda helps me here. As for cheese strategies, everything was fair game, mainly because this seed ain't exactly fair itself. However, teleporter cheeses and breaking projectile caps weren't going to be included, just because I don't find them fun to do. And with me yapping, I've accumulated enough spicy peppers to cover my food problem. After that, I start beginning my adventures to the top of the world. I actually got a pretty decent spawn, as I remember previously, this was filled with crispy honey blocks, which are a nightmare to mine. And after 2 deaths in the exact same spot, all my NPCs have unfortunately died. However, this did give us an insane drop, so you can just watch my live reaction. Well, there goes all my NPCs. Wait, what's that weapon? Classic cane, is that good or nah? 73 damage? Holy... Yeah, so NPCs would drop their weapons on death, which surprised me as I thought this was only possible in hard mode. Though it kinda makes sense in vanilla playthroughs, because the only way to obtain these NPCs are in hard mode. But needless to say, the cane was a great option. And just imagine if I got the scepter from the princess. I did eventually make my way to the tundra biome, which I received a nice snow coat and snow hood from enemies. And my first ever chest, please don't be spike shoes, please don't be spike shoes, please don't be spike shoes. Hermes boots, let's go! After some exploring, I spent today making some very cozy NPC housing so I can begin my pylon network. As you might already know, NPC happiness doesn't really matter in this seed, so pairing any pair of NPCs together will sell pylons, which are very helpful for navigating the world. I also made sure to spawn my sentry outside the dome to collect some spoils as I was building. I finished sometime later and a demon scythe dropped, one of the best mage weapons, and I finally get a useful ranged attack. Man, this seed is so easy. Anyways, I begin exploring the snow biome more, with an ice boomerang, an abandoned lab, flurry boots, and equipping the Moonlord leggings. A pretty decent mobility option, found only exclusively on this seed. I also found ice skates and blizzard in a bottle, further increasing my movement options. With more NPCs spawning, I begin my first pylon network in the snow biome, though I didn't quite have enough money at the moment. As always, early progression was the most difficult part. However, the lava charm I just got was a huge accessory upgrade, providing lava immunity, which is everywhere in this seed. I spent the rest of the day clearing out my storage and selling some junk gear, allowing me to purchase my first cavern pylon and eventually save enough money to purchase the snow pylon. As you can see, this is a huge time saver. Exploration continues as I venture up to the forest layer, collecting a chest, some heart crystals, and somehow killing enough slimes to summon the Slime King. Yeah, this thing is fat. I stood no chance at all. Back at base, I also crafted the Emerald Hook, providing a nice boost to mobility, and with that, I go off to explore the abandoned jungle lab. Fun fact, as of this version, you could actually get plague cell canisters through shimmer decrafting some of the blocks found in the lab. However, it was patched, and you also need a mithril anvil, which by the way, is also obtainable pre-hard mode. And if you watch later into the video, I'll show you how. Anyways, after shortly dying 2 times in exactly the same spot, I felt an evil presence watching me, and it's time for the first bounty to collect, the Eye of Cthulhu. I made use of the little time I had to flatten some land around my box. Shortly after, it did spawn, and the fight was on. During the early stages, it was quite easy to outrun it. However, with my lack of progression and a suboptimal loadout, the Dread Nautilus missiles got the best of me, and I died in phase 2. With that unfortunate death, it's back to powering up. I did make a platinum pickaxe to mine for Crimtane and Obsidian, as well as some gold collecting to eventually craft a full set of gold armor. I did prefer platinum armor in Calamity due to its more useful set bonus. However, platinum was definitely more scarce for me, and I had no way to access the shimmer biome at the moment. I did come across the ice lab, giving me more generic loot and the arctic diving gear, whereas it was slightly difficult to enter due to the turrets knocking me back. Nothing like a couple blocks to stop them. Eventually, I made my way to the snow shrine, which apart from having a normal tundra mount, gave me 275 delicious meats, permanently solving my hunger problem and provided me with a plenty satisfied buff. I also got Flink's Fur from the chest and was contemplating what to use them for, and a quick recipe browse gave me the idea of Snow Ruffian armor with sticky spiky balls. This was an extremely overpowered meta a couple versions back in Calamity, being able to melt a majority of pre-hard mode bosses with a few stealth strikes, and even though it was nerfed, the synergy is still pretty viable today. So with enough tattered cloth, I crafted the Goblin Battle Standard and spent today flattening out more of the right side of my base, which will have a double purpose in my Eye of Cthulhu rematch. This went as well as you can expect from a goblin invasion. I died a couple times, my NPCs died, yeah, nothing new, but I did eventually take them down, unlocking the Goblin Tinkerer for accessory upgrades and an endless supply of spiky balls and reforging. After I expanded my storage and crafting a full set of Snow Ruffian armor, now the only problem was finding the Goblin Tinkerer. With enough of the tundra biome explored, I decided the next step is onto the jungle. I did come across another abandoned lab, the place which suspicious scrap can be found, giving me a key ingredient to the SHPC, a super overpowered weapon which will be quite useful later on, as in this seed, it provides massive damage scaling. To the right of this lab was the steps to the jungle temple, which I found pretty weird considering my previous playthrough, this temple had spawned right on the surface. As I moved further away from the snow biome and onto the jungle, this ferry led me to some herb farms, which I immediately knew was the Vernal Pass. This was one of the newer Calamity structures, serving as a nice arena for bosses such as Queen Bee, Plantera, and Plaguebringer Goliath down the line. With this being a pretty convenient spot, I set up my jungle pylon network here, doing the good old get out of the screen and coming back to teleport the NPCs. And with the jungle pylon unlocked, this will give me convenient access back to this spot for the future. After clearing out my inventory, it was time to explore the Vernal Pass. I got the basic loot such as the Aglet of Wind, Staff of Regrowth, but nothing was important as finding the Goblin, immediately buying the Tinkerer's Workshop and Rocket Boots, and combining them together to make Spectre Boots. I then eventually come back to base to make Frostbark Boots and use the rest of the day to travel further up to the surface, though this adventure was kinda short-lived. Back at base again, the Molten Skull Charm was also crafted, one of the most useful early game accessories for exploration in this seed. And as I was heading back to explore some more, I got the rematch I've been waiting for. So I teleport back to base to prepare, and the fight was on. It went pretty well early on, not getting hit a single time, fully charging my adrenaline, easily dropping its health to phase 2 of the fight. My main strategy was stealth strikes to chip away at the eye, which required little to no aim on my part. A critical weakness to early game stealth builds was wasting stealth strikes on minions, so the Demon Scythe was a nice secondary option at clearing out those minions fast. You can also see the massive difference Frostbark Boots made during the second phase, as I was easily able to outrun its crazy dash attack. Who would have known, with proper gear, the Eye of Cthulhu was pretty easy, even gaining a second charge of adrenaline, decimating the eye to its final phase. I will say, it got pretty choppy towards the end. Okay, so as long as I don't get hit, we should be fine to defeat the eye. As long as I don't choke the final part. Oh no, I'm choking. Okay, Rage. Come on, come on, come on. Let's go! Finally, my first boss down. And with that, marks the end of Act 1. And now we move on to the Scorching Sands arc. So with the Eye's defeat, you know how I was talking about crazy progression breaks within Calamity Zenith Seed? Well, here's your first major example. The Optic Staff, a normally post-mech summon weapon, was now dropped in pre-hard mode. Whereas the weapon was slightly nerfed in Calamity, it was still by far the best choice of weapon, and thus, it's time to spec into Summoner. This consists of me crafting the Snapthorn and the Flink's Fur Coat. I could have also farmed the eye for the Death Stare Rod, but quite honestly, I couldn't be bothered. And after some reforging, I'm feeling quite powerful right now. And looking at my map, I realized I haven't explored much of the desert at all, so that was my next objective. I assume since the Jungle Temple and Vernal Pass was on the right side of the world, then the Sunken Sea, along with the Underground Desert, would be on the left side. So that's where I'm headed today, coming across the Magic MURA, Cleansing Jelly, and even finding the Angler. As I make my way to the desert biome, here are the key things I'm looking for. The most obvious is the Desert Scourge, and whereas not a necessity to progression, drops an important accessory in this seed, the Sand Shark Tooth Necklace, which on top of being a great offensive accessory, can also be shimmered to give class emblems as well as 5 of each mechanical soul. Along the way, I also decided to place my forest pylon here, as I've been traveling so far away from spawn, and it would be quite a shame to die and have to walk all the way back. This location is pretty nice for cavern fishing, and since it spawns quote-unquote surface enemies, it would also make for a nice farming spot later on. After some time, I've eventually made it to the desert biome, and before I immediately die, I set up some more NPC pylons, moving away so they could teleport in, and now I have a pretty nice network of pylons set up. Exploring the desert was definitely one of the hardest biomes early on. The rolling cactus, strong enemies, and the antlions doing this, as well as mining upwards, causing sand to fall on you, which hurt quite a bit with my low defense. The loot was subpar too, as I didn't find anything I was looking for. I did come across the Golfer just chilling here, and after dying to a TNT barrel, which by the way are the worst things ever invented, I respawned back at base and purchased the Zappinator and Frost Barrier from the Traveling Merchant, and used this time to cap out my mana. Back at the desert, even with Splunker potions, I found it so difficult to find the Lux's gift. Again, the falling sand was so annoying, so I came up with a new idea. Using the forest pylon, I decided it was best to mine close to the surface and enter through the pyramids. I already had all the fire immunity I would ever need, so this was going to be an easier option. What I didn't account for was that in this sea, Calamity makes this hive catalyst one-shottable, meaning any damage to it will spawn the hive mind boss. Doesn't seem like it's moving. Maybe I can chase it with my Zappinator? Oh, never mind, right? Man, this sea just keeps getting even more and more fun. What was even worse was that the mini creeper minions don't even despawn when I die to the boss, meaning it was blocking my path back to the tunnel, so I just reloaded my world. Screw having to deal with that. Luckily, spawn blockers do exist, so my life moving forward would be a lot easier. On my way back, I eventually did run into the desert temple, giving me the sandstorm in a bottle, and breaching down from the pyramid, I eventually did find the desert shrine, giving me the desert key, Splunker's amulet, and the Lux's gift. Whereas this accessory does kinda suck for other classes, it's quite decent for early summoners, providing a magical rune that actually scales off the summoned weapon's base damage. And with that slight upgrade, I thought it would be time to challenge the Desert Scourge. For being the first boss in Calamity, how hard could this be? I made a city buster, which nicely cleared out an area for me, and got to work building my arena. I deliberately made my arena small, just because I didn't want the antlions to spawn off screen and completely ruin my arena. And with preparations pretty much finished, I spawned the meme worm. Yeah, this fight is a complete joke, and even with the various strategies I tried, I was not even close. How's this possible? How? Who made this boss? I didn't get it. So for the next hour or so, most of the footage was just me prepping the surface. I set up a blue mushroom pylon, did some more exploring, built a miniature arena, farmed some Eater of Souls. That was kinda about it. I did set up a temporary NPC house in the middle of my arena, and you'll find out shortly what that's for. While I wait for the nurse to move back in, I do a bit of housekeeping. And that's where I run into a demon that dropped the Blade Crest Oath Sword, one of the strongest melee weapons in pre-hard mode, and definitely a nice secondary weapon to use. But my luck got even better when a Shadow Mimic actually dropped next to my base. This gave me the Cross Necklace, which is a pretty good accessory granting immunity frames. And with these newly acquired items, I thought it would be wise to switch back to the melee build to challenge the Eater of Worlds. So I craft my worm food and head up to the surface. As you can see from my first attempt at the Eater of Worlds, whereas his health was extremely chonky, you might be wondering why I'm challenging this boss quite early on, and the main reasoning is that each segment you kill will drop a light disc. Apart from being a pretty strong ranged melee option, it can also be shimmered to give you hallowed bars, and in turn, give you access to all the hard mode orbs. I managed to pop my adrenaline, and eventually burst down my first segment for the light disc. Okay, this is good. We should be able to get a light disc here. Man, look at its health, it's literally going outside of the box. Oh man. Oh, there we go, we got a light disc. I then quickly swapped to the new weapon and deal as much damage as I could to farm even more of them quickly. I did eventually end up dying 2 minutes into the fight with barely any damage to the boss, but as you can see, we did obtain quite a few light discs, and you may have noticed the nurse respawn during the beginning of this fight. And with that, let me show you a cool magic trick. Calamity makes the nurse cast Doom on the player when talking to her, causing an explosion and dealing pretty significant damage. I thought I could use this to my advantage to cheese the Desert Scourge, which naturally has pretty low health. And well, you can watch the clip for yourself. Okay, guys, let me cook for a second. Since the nurse explodes, why don't we use it to kill the Desert Scourge? This might not even work, but I'm just gonna try it anyways. 3, 2, 1... Okay, what? That actually worked. First try. There's no way. Yep, that was the Desert Scourge, easily defeated. And now, I have so many upgrades I can make. So my first order of business was the treasure bag. And somehow, I actually got a developer set with wings and even a hard mode yo-yo. This was only possible in this seed, and it was extremely lucky on my part. And with a lot of gear being able to be shimmered, I tried to make my way to the shimmer biome, even coming across the abandoned shed, but my plan was eventually foiled due to the larvae spawning queen bees. So in an attempt to obtain the magical conch, I'm gonna be doing some relaxing fishing, using my old desert arena as a nice pond, with a good old infinite water trick, and leaving my fishing in the background. For my first fishing haul, none of the crate loot was really noteworthy. I did get an extractinator, which finally allowed me to extract all the silt and slush I've been collecting throughout my journey. I did eventually fish up an oasis crate, and with that, allowed me to craft the magical conch. I will say when using the conch, they spawned me into the sulphurous sea to the left side of my world, and the normal crimson beach to the right side. Since I knew the vernal pass, aka the jungle biome, is on the left, this would mean that the shimmer biome would be on this side as well. It didn't take long for me to eventually run into it, and with that, I empty out my piggy bank filled with light disc, and shimmer crafted all of them, with 480 hallowed bars, 600 souls of might, and 360 souls of light. This was the shimmer decrafting chain for hallowed bars, and after some decrafting, I eventually had enough to make a hard mode anvil. I also used this time to decraft my sand shark tooth necklace, and with a bunch of goodies, it's time to have some fun crafting some hard mode equipment in pre-hard mode. So I made a hard mode anvil, and made a quick detour to get a hell forge, which was used to make a hard mode forge. What class shall I choose? Let's now enter Act 3. With endless class possibilities, I chose to go with the melee route because the current yo-yo I have is insanely strong for bosses, and the Gungnir is another great true melee weapon. The Excalibur on the other hand was kinda nerfed here with this terrible swing speed. And lastly, I made a hallowed pickaxe, allowing me to mine charred ore, chlorophyte in hard mode, and it's just super nice to have. So this is my loadout so far, and it's safe to say I'm feeling quite strong right now. And with that being said, let's destroy some bosses. I first made some basic buffs, which grant infinite durations at 30 stacks. This is always a must-have quality of life mod for me, as I knew I would be dying hundreds of times, and having to reapply and farm for buffs would be quite annoying. My first order of business is Calamitas. Not that Calamitas, but the Calamitas. Where's this damn clam? I see what they did there, Calamitas. Like Calamitas. Wow, even kind of has like the baby bullet hills, which is pretty cool. Yeah, too bad I'm too strong. And with that, Amidas is now free. There wasn't anything quite useful for me in the Sunken Sea, so I grabbed some of the shards and carried on to challenge Crabulon. I did make a quick stop to obtain some more light discs, which I would sell for cash. I then went ahead to make an arena for Crabulon, using some city busters, insta bridges, as well as relocating my NPCs, because I kinda blew up their home. Anyways, the Crabulon fight. I could see how this could be extremely difficult because of the odd mushroom effect. This made tracking the boss pretty hard, but with hard mode gear, it wasn't much of a problem for me. But I did get to capture a pretty funny moment from my playthrough. Wait, do I have the odd mushroom effect for the rest of the playthrough? There's no way Calamity is this evil, right? Wait, how come it's not removing? Dying doesn't remove it? Seriously, am I stuck like this? It turns out, since Crabulon dropped so many odd mushrooms, another quality of life mod I had made these permanent. So yeah, that was the issue solved, and I'm a total idiot. As for the rest of the drops, the plasma root drop was useful for permanently boosting the duration of my rage meter, but other than that, nothing else was really that useful. Moving swiftly onto the next boss, I wanted to see what the Brain of Cthulhu would drop, so I made my way to the Crimson biome, and after some limit testing, oh yeah, the standing still strat works every time. As I soon realized, a tip I discovered when completing my first vanilla Zenith Seed run is to make sure you stand somewhat still in its second phase, which will stop you from taking immense contact damage because the brain doesn't really move close to you. As for drops, we have the Occult Crown, which was a post-Devour of Gods accessory. However, I didn't end up using it a whole lot, which looking back was a tiny mistake on my end. I did get another developer set from the treasure bag, so this is the new vanity set I'll be rocking. I did keep the same wings however, just because of the float mechanic was nice to have. It is also a shame that there isn't any way to obtain Souls of Night in pre-hard mode, as I could have made some more useful items, but I did craft fairy boots, which are something I forgot earlier, whereas in vanilla, these are absolutely terrible. The fairies in Calamity grant life regen, defense, and move speed, making them pretty viable boots until Angel Treads. One thing I thought I could get in pre-hard mode were mimic drops, by crafting Keys of Light, though I quickly realized this didn't work, and was kind of a waste of time. So next on the agenda was the Perforators, which I'll have to unfavorite my anti-catalyst ointment, which will begin to spawn the Siths near me. Eventually, one did spawn, and the fight itself wasn't that bad at all. Apart from the unusual rain of projectiles and worm spawning, one new mechanic introduced was the introduction of laser wars, similarly to the Devour of Gods. Whoa, okay, guess we're versing Devour of Gods now. Jeez, that hurts. This certainly caught me off guard, and one mistake from my first attempt was trying to burst the hive whilst the worms were currently active. This grants damage reduction to the boss, and was not an effective strategy, and ultimately, the overwhelming swarm of worms got the best of me. After some arena expansions and station buffs, I was once again ready to challenge the Perforators. Take 2 Perforators. This time I'm gonna kill the worms that spawn, because when I was VOD reviewing, that was close. Oh, what was I saying? Yeah, when I was reviewing the fight, the hive seemed to take no damage, so we'll see if this fixes it. Okay, we have adrenaline coming up. Oh, okay, never mind. That was basically the fight in a nutshell, and if you guys are interested in the full unedited fight of all these bosses and future bosses, I'll be compiling that into one big video at the end of the series, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you made it this far, make sure to subscribe because it helps the channel out a ton. This unlocks Aerolite ore, which will spawn underground as opposed to on Sky Islands like we're used to. And as for the unique drop, we got 3,927 blood fins, which are actually a post Moonlord health potion, as well as the bloody worm tooth, further boosting my melee loadout. Nothing else from the drops was really worth it, so I spent the next days constructing more NPC housing, and refighting the Desert Scourge for another Sand Shark Tooth necklace, since I shimmered my last one. Now, don't get it twisted, whereas I had hard mode gear, it was still surprisingly difficult, as the water projectiles dealt over 700 damage to me, which is just insane to think about. I could fight this in pre-hard mode. It makes me kind of nervous of what to expect in hard mode, but I did eventually manage to kill it, and use the Sand Shark Tooth necklace to replace my warrior emblem. Continuing our rampage through pre-hard mode bosses, I spent today re-challenging King Slime, and
Damn, boy, he's thick!
I will say I got quite humbled, as I thought I could easily tank the hits from the slime, but I keep forgetting this is Get Fixed Boi, where everything can kill you. So for my second attempt, I made sure to keep my distance with the Valkyrie Yo-Yo. King Slime doesn't really have any useful drops for me, mainly Aurea cells and the slimy saddle, but it was nice to cross another boss off the list. I then spent today mining some Hellstone, as I made my way to the Brimstone Crags, and placed some NPC housing to get the crag pylon going. Since I had a hallowed pickaxe, it was also possible to obtain charred ore and make unholy cores. And a little side note, this was also possible without the pickaxe, by shimmer decrafting some of the furniture in this biome. I would usually skip parts like this, that doesn't really affect the rest of my progression, though I thought it was important to mention, just in case any of you wanted to follow along and didn't have the similar RNG that I had to obtain a developer set. The only craftable weapons possible were the Brimrose Staff, Brimstone Sword, and Brimstone Fury, and whereas these were definitely decent options for their respective classes, it wasn't going to outperform what I already have. So the next boss up is the Queen Bee, which is a huge milestone in this seed, which I'll show you why shortly. So I got some bottled honey and crafted the abomination and got to work building a mini arena at the Vernal Pass. Apart from the usual Zenith seed AI changes, Queen Bee also spawned mini plague enemies and spewed lava every time she would dash. Even though I died in my first attempt, oh man, so close. The fight itself was not difficult at all, as having good vertical mobility and a good tracking weapon were key to this fight. And since I had the Halo gear, this was no issue for me at all on the second attempt. Alright, last phase, here we go. Charge projectiles up. As I've mentioned with the spawning of plague enemies, this ultimately dropped the plague cell canisters, give me the option to challenge the Plaguebringer Goliath or craft the Wither Blossom staff, which as of recording this section was easily the most broken summoner weapon in Calamity. My first kill only gave me 8 canisters and I wanted to keep the flask that she dropped, so a quick re-challenge of Queen Bee gave me enough resources to craft the Wither Blossom staff. And with this overpowered weapon obtained and requiring only 2 minion slots to use, it was time to spec back into summoner. Whereas I could not obtain Plaguebringer armor due to also needing infected platings, the next best option was the hallowed set. So I made the Durandal whip, got some summoner potions, and headed back to the Shimmer biome to decraft my Sand Shark Tooth necklace. And if you're wondering why the Aurea cells are here, I tried shimmering some drops early on and just forgot about them. Back at base, I finished off my loadout by crafting the Spirit Glyph and turning this into the Hallowed Room. And for my final step was killing another Desert Scourge for another necklace, replacing my Bloody Worm Tooth. And now we are quite overpowered. If you want a little DPS comparison, I dealt around 1.7k with my summoner loadout right now, and a mere 1k damage with my Valkyrie Yo-Yo. Anyways, I lied about finalizing my final build. I forgot the last step, which was to purchase an imbuing station and make some flask of poison for my whip. And with my newly acquired summoner gear, I thought it would be the perfect time to test these out on the Old One's army invasion, mostly for the war table and the accessory giving me a free sentry slot. As you would expect from hard mode gear against tier 1 Old One's army, it was quite easy. The Wither Blossoms absolutely shreds everything, and the Dark Mage was no match for me. That was Old One's army, and let's never touch this invasion again for the rest of the playthrough. So now let's make our way to the dungeon. This would be tricky to get, as previously a simple magic conch to the beach would get me close enough to enter the dungeon. But now that would send me to the Sulphurous Sea, so the best thing I could do was take the Mushroom Pylon and first try Skeletron as I head to the dungeon. As I entered down from the living tree, I noticed the Bewitching table just sitting there at the entrance, which would have been amazing to know beforehand. So now I have 6 minion slots with 2 sentries, and after making a simple arena for Skeletron, it's time to challenge it. The boss fight was so short that I could probably talk over it for a bit and the boss would be defeated before I made any cuts. You know, this meme is kinda true, where Vanilla Summoner feels like this and Calamity Summoner is completely broken. Ah yes, classic Calamity Summoner, completely decimating bosses. That is, without dying to a fireball, but let's cut that. After recovering my loot, it's time to explore the dungeon. The scene is just pain. I knew I was going to keep dying over and over again, and the long trip over here doesn't really help. So the plan now, before I explore, is to shift my pylons around, by first creating a sunken sea pylon, which is close to the desert anyways, and shift my current desert pylon closer to the dungeon. With this, I was able to mine a tunnel to safely and more quickly access the dungeon, and after a couple minutes, I bridged to the dungeon. Now if I could summarize Calamity's dungeon in one word, it would be annoying. Apart from the existing darkness effect, the entire dungeon is filled to the brim with spikes. Pretty much every wall has spikes on them, making navigation through the dungeon an absolute pain. As for dungeon loot, nothing was really important, as I collected the usual bones, water candles, and eventually come across the mechanic, which is huge for teleporters and heart generators. A bit more exploration later, I did come across the Forsaken Archive. This did give me 2 spell tomes, which meant the Burning Sea was another option to consider, though that wouldn't be necessary as my current summoner build was far superior. And with the drop of the Necro Staff, this has pretty much finalized my pre-hard mode summoner build, as these minions are extremely strong for the last few bosses we have to defeat. With Skeletron's defeat, we also unlock abyssal treasures from the Abyss. So for today, I did a bit of exploration, obtaining the Hurring Staff, Depth's Charm, Archerfish, Plating, Lionfish, and Iron Boots, before I ultimately drowned. Now that marks my final session on version 2.3.004, as the new update has reworked a couple things. You can watch this video right here for a recap, however nothing really impacts us right now. One major change however was the deserved nerf of the Wither Blossom staff, but it was still the best option, so we'll be sticking with it. And since we'll be entering hard mode very soon, the next couple of days were spent on preparations. My first order of business was setting up some teleporters, but a quick check at my money meant I needed to make some first, if I wanted enough wires to connect all my teleporters together. Luckily for me, there's a pretty simple way to do that within this seed, by defeating the perforators again, and selling the absurd amount of blood fins. It gives me 126 platinum, which will be plenty for the time being. And I bought pretty much everything I ever wanted. I then made more insta housing, expanding each pylon network to 3 houses, and began setting up my teleporter network. Beginning with my first teleporter, which will connect my blue mushroom pylon to the surface, my next teleporter, which connects the desert to the Forsaken Archive, and the last one linking my ocean to the Shimmer biome. These will significantly cut down on the time of traveling to different areas of the map, and continuing with preparations, it's now time to create some farms. As making them in hard mode, I knew from experience this would be a nightmare. The first one I construct is a simple ocean key farm, which also has a double purpose on this seed, as surface mobs will drop Souls of Night in hard mode. I started by tearing down the platforms to stop mobs from spawning on them, and by finding the midpoint of the ocean, I got to work constructing an artificial jungle biome. And whilst we wait for the jungle blocks to spread, it's now time to construct our underground jungle biome, which starts off with a city buster to make a large area, going up around 50 blocks, and creating a blocks with spawning platforms. You can already see it doing wonders, as a mimic has spawned, and gave me a nice little upgrade to my grappling hook. I then constructed my volcano, and now the final step is the traps, buffs, and making sure there's lava below to stop the mobs from spawning there. Whilst I also let this farm grow, I begin making my last one near the Shimmer biome. I won't bore you with me doing the exact same things, so here's just a hyperlapse to the end. I did come across an imp statue, which will be super useful later on. So with every farm complete, it's now time to shimmer some permanent power-ups such as a life crystal, mana crystal, and an apple to make the ambrosia. The empty spell tome I got from the Forsaken Archive could also be shimmered and gave a nice boost to my NPCs. Maybe this means my nurse will do even more damage. Who knows? Now it's time for the Wall of Flesh arena. Looking back, I did not need to make this absurdly long. As to the right side, I eventually hit the Hell Lab and got myself the Mirror's Armor, though obviously I couldn't use it right now. Then I got the imp statue from earlier and made a little AFK spot where I could use to collect the imp banners. For those unaware, the Wall of Flesh summons imps in the Get Fixed Boi Seed, which do an insane amount of damage. I got a lot of suggestions from my first playthrough to use imp statues to farm for banners. I left this running in the background and came back with 2,250 fire imps. And with 46 imp banners to place, it's time to get started placing some buffs on my arena. And after some campfires, heart lanterns, and banners placed throughout, the arena was set. However, there was still some unfinished business to attend to. The first thing I did was explore some sky islands and planetoids, which actually have hard mode ores in them, which are a nice addition that I didn't know existed in this seed. I eventually also made it to the main planetoid, giving me a bunch of random junk, but most importantly, the plasma core, another important ingredient to the SHPC. And with a successful space expedition, it's time for another boss rush. Beginning with the hive mind, this was obviously really easy with the gear that I have acquired, though a pretty fun interaction happened when I killed my first one, another spawned, and then another, and there was so many that was spawning. Yo, why do they keep spawning? What the? My gosh, it's getting so crazy. Look man, they just keep spawning. I don't get it. I didn't know what happened, but this ended up lagging my game quite a bit, and I had to reload my world. With Hive Mind crossed off the list, the next boss is the Deerclops. Other than a surprise appearance from Queen Bee, which was unironically harder than the real boss, I feel like this was pretty neglected when coming with exclusive Get Fixed Boi changes, as the attacks were pretty much the same. And this is the only boss without a unique Calamity job. Now all that's left is the Slime God, and I head back up to the surface for some intense demolition. This involves using a bunch of city busters to create a flat area that wasn't so high up in space. Next, I simply excavate the mud walls, which I must say was pretty satisfying. And the last step, which involves placing some insta platforms, and topping it off with the classic arena buffs. Now all that's left to do was challenge Slime God. The Wither Blossom Staff and Necro were extremely effective at dealing with the slimes, and it was quite funny seeing how big the slime core was, in comparison to the Paladins. I will say the hut statues were quite OP in this, healing me back up to full and allowing me to more greedily position, dealing around 1.5k DPS and not having any trouble with this boss at all. And with that, marks the final boss before the Wall of Flesh. The unique drop from the Slime God was the Gelatin Crystal, which would have been cool to challenge Queen Slime in pre-hard mode, though one small issue, there was no Hallowed biome, so I couldn't really spawn it in. From the treasure bag, I consumed another permanent power up, giving me more adrenaline damage, but nothing else was needed, as Status Gel was pretty low in progression compared to my post-mech gear I'm currently using. Now it's the next day, and it's time to challenge the Wall of Flesh, which was one of the hardest bosses for me in vanilla Get Fixed Boi. I teleport to the Brimstone Crags and begin my first attempt. This went surprisingly well, as I got into around 13k HP in 50 seconds, with so much of the runway still available. I would imagine with the pre-nerfed Wither Blossom Staff, I could have killed it pretty quickly, so with that into consideration, I could stay further back and focus more on dodging without the worry of not being able to kill it in time. One side note is I did end up making a Fleshy Doll, which is an alternate summon for the Wall of Flesh that doesn't require the guide to be alive, just because I didn't really feel like waiting for the guide to spawn after each attempt. With the second try, I dropped it to around 12k HP, though I'm going to blame my lack of vertical space for this one. Stupid imp, get out of the way! Oh yeah, this run is over. Yeah, it's over. Man, it's always the same spot, I keep dying there. My third attempt, I made a slight adjustment, spawning the boss in a more open area, away from the ruined houses. This attempt went so much better, and you can imagine how amazing the necrostites are for bosses like this. Alright, this time I'm gonna go to a more flat area, because if you quickly look at my map, I don't think I need all this space. Wait, Goblin Army, really? Oh well, let's go. Since I have Shadow Dodge, I'm gonna play a bit more aggressive this time, and just get some nice whip damage. Okay, now I'm gonna play back and focus more on dodging. My minions should have plenty of time to kill it anyway, so... Ooh, that was a big hit. Let's not get too cocky here. Man, those curved demon sights are crazy. We should have it here though. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There we go! Say it with me, Calamity Summoner is perfectly balanced. But the action doesn't stop, as I have to quickly deal with the Goblin Army that was approaching as I summoned the Wall of Flesh. So now let's review all the loot we got. The Hermit's box grants us the third Sage, which means after respawning, we'll be back at max HP, which is actually quite convenient considering how many deaths we've accumulated so far, and the Nurse being absolutely useless in this scene. Next is the Eye of Magnus, a strong classless weapon which applies Mark for Death to enemies. Insanely useful, and is usually obtained post-lunar events. This could also be shimmered for Nebula Fragments, though don't get too excited, as we also need an Ancient Manipulator to craft any of the late game items. From the treasure bag, useful items include the Firecracker and Demon Heart. There is so much for us to do in hard mode, and I love how flexible this point of progression is in Calamity. You can spawn Plantera before mechs, Cryogen for Daedalus equipment, or the Aquatic Scourge for the most useful drops for all classes. If you're wondering what route I decided to go for first, here's a hint. This act is called the Terror Trail. Since the summoner route was working for me so far, I summoned another Goblin Army to obtain the first Shadow Flame, for a total of 7 minion slots. I then go to my Shimmer biome, which is where the Hallowed spawn. I found the Wizard here, which sells the Rod of Discord, but don't be fooled, as inflicting Chaos State in this seed will summon Jaren, the adult Eldon Worm, regardless of whether or not you're in the Abyss. After finding that out, in this biome, I challenged my first hard mode boss, being Queen Slime. This was sort of like a bullet hell, which I find quite enjoyable in Terraria bosses. With the Eye of Magnus and Durandal for debuffs, I was able to burst down the slime onto its second phase. This grants her wings as she spews out floating slime balls, which I think is different than the normal gravity affected ones. Her ground slam is also slightly more difficult, as these will release spikes that fly outwards. The projectile spam can get hectic towards the end, but it was no match. And that's my first hard mode boss defeated. Calamity's unique drop for the Queen Slime is the bottomless Shimmer Bucket. Ooh, okay, Shimmer Bucket, treasure bag. Doesn't look like anything different in here. Okay, I just looked at the wiki. The shimmer bucket is crafted with 10 luminite in its recipe. So if we can transmute it, it's going to be huge for us. So let's see, moment of truth. Ah, damn. I kind of figured this wouldn't be possible, though this is future me speaking, and there is definitely another way to obtain luminite. But you'll just have to watch later in the video to find out. But for the time being, I did make myself a more convenient spot to shimmer, just to save that bit of extra time. Next on the agenda was planning for the Aquatic Scourge fight. This provides summoners with massive boosts if you manage to kill it. The deep sea stuff in particular is quite strong for summoners, as well as the nuclear fuel rod giving me an additional minion slot. So to prepare, I first head over to the snow biome, and with the Zerg potions, made farming for the ancient ice chunk fairly quick. This weapon consumes 1 minion slot that fires icicle blasts at a long range, and will dash at enemies in close range. For OG players, this was reworked and is really flexible now. Then with Siren Mouths, I head to the jungle ocean farm I created earlier for Souls of Night as well as Ichor, which I would then ultimately turn into Ichor flasks, as well as buying some soaring potions from the MURA. I could craft these, but screw fishing, am I right? The next step to farming up requires the hallowed biome. I decided to build an artificial one near my forest pylon, as this was where the quote-unquote surface enemies were spawning. Hallowed mobs such as pixies, unicorns, and gastropods, as opposed to my shimmer hallow, which spawn illuminate enemies. I also found the cavern lab in the forest biome, and I gotta say, this is definitely the coolest lab out of all of them. And I love how the onyx drill is part of the build, and breaking it will give you the item instead of just getting it from a regular chest. Anyways, I used this drill to make a flat layer, then used some city busters to clear out some land. I placed pearlstone blocks to get mobs to spawn, and spent a couple days here just farming for some general loot. Nothing special about that, so I'll just fast forward a bit until it's time to construct an arena for the Aquatic Scourge. Unlike in regular Calamity worlds, I would have to fight this boss submerged in water, which meant flipper, gills, and sulfur skin potions were important. A bleach ball was also useful, as it blocks natural Aquatic Scourge spawns, and would make my life constructing an arena much easier. Yo, I'm sorry for destroying your home, please. Ah, damn. One slight adjustment was the use of coral torches and campfires, which work underwater, but other than that, arena construction was mostly the same. With hard mode unlocked, I also made Fabsul's vodka, allowing the drunken princess to move in. This is actually pretty funny, but she will slap the player each time you try to talk to her, but a simple grapple stops the knockback. Here I saw my death count of 104 times, which I didn't think was actually that bad, but the main things I'm looking for are the buff candles. These are often neglected in playthroughs, but make a huge difference in arenas, providing all these great stats. And with pretty much infinite money, it was no trouble buying a ton of these. And I spent the rest of the day placing these candles around my arena. And making some additional houses at the Sulphurous Sea, just so I didn't have to use the magical conch every time. With everything crafted, it was time to challenge the Aquatic Scourge. In this seed, there is a special mechanic in which being a certain distance away will trigger you to be hit with a sulfuric poisoning effect. This alone made the fight absolutely hell, and it meant you kinda have to keep chasing the boss, which is not a good idea against worm bosses, especially when he aggroes back onto you with his devastating head charge. Needless to say, after 3 attempts, what is that damage? I literally got one shot. Yeah, okay, this is not possible. No way. Like, if I'm too far away, I take damage. If I'm too close, I can't dodge. I was nowhere close to defeating him, which meant I had to rethink my strategy here. Using Calamity's linear progression system, I decided that a boss I could have a chance with was Plantera. She unlocks so many important things, and thus was my next goal in progression. On my first attempt against Plantera, I utilized my small arena to challenge her. It was quite easy as I expected. I'm 45 seconds into the fight? I don't think Plantera has any different attacks from vanilla Zenith. Like, she doesn't do anything different. Yeah, this is definitely the play. We'll see what happens in phase 2, but Plantera looks way easier. Plus, it will give us good stuff as well. Ah, how silly I was. Little did I know her second phase was going to be a whole different story. She would spawn a lot of vine, and I mean a lot. And whereas this would be fine, they also detach from her and swarm the player, dealing upwards of 200 damage, which is just nuts. The Rod of Discord won't help me, so I had to come up with a plan. I tried a second time at the arena next door, utilizing heart statues and different buffs, but to no avail. Like, seriously, these damn vines hurt. A majority of my health gone to a single stupid vine. The SHPC was a weapon I hinted at earlier, and whereas it could be crafted pretty quickly into my playthrough, now is the prime time to use it. And with that being said, I now switch over to a mage loadout. This involves me mining for chlorophyte, for the chlorophyte mage set, as well as switching to the magnet flower, and heading up into space for some fishing, whilst obtaining some souls of flight. With that, I could craft the celestial emblem, and lastly, the fairy wings. Whereas these were slightly worse flight-wise, the max HP it provides is pretty nice to have. I also rechallenged King Slime for more Aurea cells, and you can just see the potential of the SHPC against King Slime, as the splash damage is amazing. As for today, I headed back up to the Sunken Sea biome, and challenged Supreme Calamitas, the hard mode variant of Calamitas. I also killed the Serpent, giving me the Serpentine spell tome. This was another early mage weapon, and performs pretty nice AoE damage. And with all those preparations into mage, it's time to re-challenge Plantera. As you may have noticed, this boss has 200,000 HP, which is quite nuts. As usual, phase 1 was pretty easy, and with my newly acquired loadout, it felt much better. Alright, phase 2, here we go. Damn, the mage is busted, 35k DPS. Look how good the splash damage is. Yeah, we got this easy. Oh god, no. Okay, so damage wasn't the issue there. I think I just need to expand my arena a bit more so we have more space to like run away. So that's exactly what I did today. I combined both the Vernal Pass arena with the AFK farm to create one mega arena, which will be extremely useful to keep these little vines away from me. Some extra changes I made include using life force potions, angel treads, crafting the charm of myths. With these additions, I was so close to beating Plantera. We got this easy, come on. Are you kidding me? How does that kill me? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I choked it, with only 20,000 HP left. I knew this was possible, I just needed to improve my dodging a bit. Another super annoying thing during my attempts was that Plantera would sometimes despawn if I was too far away. But the thing was I had to be positioned far away if I wanted to be able to kill the vines that were swiftly dashing at me. I will say this was extremely frustrating and definitely the first serious challenge of this entire run. Sorry, but this rant isn't over. I also forgot to mention the corrupt grass spikes, which spawn everywhere, making it pretty hard to build adrenaline. One thing I also tried to do was fight her in rage, and my thought process was with the larger arena, I could easily just outrun the boss. But with the rapid regen, it didn't make this strategy possible. If you're wondering why I didn't challenge any of the other bosses, well, I kinda did, testing the waters against the Brimstone Elemental, Medusa, and even Calamitas clone. And trust me, Plantera was definitely the easiest out of all these options. I did take a little break, spending today doing a bit of fishing in the Astral Infection. This is a good time to remind you, if you're ever struggling through a particular boss in a playthrough, taking a break or doing something else really helps the mental. The goal of this fishing session was to craft gravity normalizer potions to solve my future space problems. However, as I soon found out, this seems to not work in this seed, and they were quite useless. Anyways, I'm back to fighting Plantera again today, and I was feeling really good about this run. Phase 1 was quite easy as usual, as a simple circular motion around the Vernal Pass was enough. Eventually, I got my adrenaline, which was a huge damage boost. As you can hear from the recording, I was definitely in the zone. This is good, this is good. I have rage and adrenaline. I think I'm just gonna pop it when I get hit. Like now? No, how did I get hit there? Rage damage, okay, come on. This is the hardest part, all the flying vines. Oh my gosh. Huge dodge there. Why is my heart beating over a 10-year-old pixel game? Okay, I think we got her hardest phase down. Should be a smooth finish as long as I don't like despawn it like last time. I was feeling really good. You can see how effective the SHPC was at knocking back the minions from dashing towards me. And after an extremely close juke back towards the other side of my arena, this was definitely the run. With most of her minions defeated, the rest of the fight was pretty easy. I even got a second charge of adrenaline, which made the boss fight slightly faster. And with that, Plantera has finally been defeated.
Oh, MURA, I see you've made it far. I banished you to this world to punish you for clickbaiting Calamity videos and making the devs' lives living hell. This world isn't meant to be conquered, but you still persist. My glorious creations have proved to be easy for you. Very well then, prepare to suffer.
There is once again so many routes you can go for after killing Plantera. I'll quickly mention the Ranger route. That was an option I detoured to for some experimentation. I first consumed the rest of my life fruits because Plantera drops either 1 or 9,000 of these. With the sideboard being allowed to move in, I made some more temporary housing. And I know I keep saying temporary, but don't worry, we'll be building a base eventually in this 100 days. Just wait. And speaking of waiting, while I let the sideboard move in, I kill some more queen bees. Shimmer the alchemist flasks for more plague cell canisters, and with the nanites from the sideboard could be combined with plague cell canisters to make plague reaper armor. This provides some amazing ranger stats, as well as a unique set bonus, in which our vision will be limited significantly. However, in return, you gain an additional 60% range damage boost and 20% critical strike chance. Ranger was looking to be a strong switch. I will hover over this section pretty quickly, as I ultimately switched back to Summoner, but the next couple days entailed me crafting archery potions, reforging, venom arrows, and after a few mimics killed, transmuting them for flesh knuckles into putrid scent, I made the Stalker's Quiver. During this time, I also killed another Desert Scourge for more souls, and summoned a Blood Moon. I didn't know if any of these quality of life mods, or if it was Calamity itself making this, but I had no natural Blood Moon spawning throughout this entire journey, which was super weird considering the hundreds of them I got in my vanilla run. With all the ingredients, I made the Blood Orange, boosting my max HP. And if you're wondering why I switched back to Summoner, it was ultimately kind of preference. Ranger was by far the superior choice, considering how OP the Blossom Flux is, and the nerf of the Wither Blossom staff. However, Ranger required me to aim. It may be a stupid reason, but focusing on dodging was super important to me, and I definitely noticed this in my trial against Calamitas, which I could not aim at all, and I got hit by every single projectile. I opened the Jungle Temple today, and now it's back to the Summoner route. And with many things unlocked, my first order of business is the Desert Tiger Staff. And I'm saying this from the future of me recording this, but geez, did this weapon carry me for a long time. After a quick reforge, I head back to the dungeon and spent today farming for Ectoplasm, the Morningstar Whip, as well as the ingredients to make the Master Ninja gear. With that eventually finished, it's now time for the Pumpkin Moon. I started the invasion in my jungle farm to easily clear out the first filler waves. Morning Wood would give me the ingredients for the Spooky Armor and Necromantic Scroll, whereas the Pumpkin would drop the Dark Harvest and Black Fairy Dust. I would say the only difficult part of this was the pumpkins, which I even struggled to kill one. After a long night of destroying scarecrows and evil spirits, I eventually ended the night with a majority of what I wanted, apart from the Dark Harvest Whip, which was actually a huge bummer considering how well it synergizes with the Desert Tiger Staff. With the loot I did obtain, I crafted the Spooky Armor, Spooky Wings, and moved the Witch Doctor to the jungle to obtain Hercules Beetle, and eventually made the Papyrus Scarab. Then with Status's Blessing being able to be crafted after Plantera, I now have 11 minion slots, and I'm once again feeling really strong. And now it's time to give Brimstone Elemental a challenge. This drops the Heart of the Elements, which will be another good boost for my Summoner loadout. Now, the Brimstone Elemental was a bullet hell boss, which was good for me, as I actually prefer these a lot more. She has special AI which will cycle between a different element as her health decreases, such as 80% casting Sand Tornadoes, or at 20% casting Anahida's Treble Clefs. Her teleports also spawn lasers in a cross shade. Learning her AI was surprisingly fun, and I quite enjoyed this fight. Keeping your distance away from the boss was valuable, as she couldn't really despawn if you moved too far away, and this would also give you more time to react to her Brimstone Blast. During her Cocoon phase, the blasts that were fired had quite a delayed tracking, so it's good to be more reactive than predictive with your dodging. As you could probably tell, I disabled my background for this fight just to make seeing her projectiles a little bit easier. And with the boss being finally slain, I now have access to Heart of the Elements. I know this accessory isn't exactly the meta for summoners, as it's been nerfed several times, but getting it super early in progression is definitely worth the accessory slot, providing me with both damage support and emotional support. The next day was spent refighting Queen Slime for the Blade Star, which I then crafted into the Plantation Summon. This was recently reworked in version 2.3.5, and as of recording this video, I'm still doing a bit of testing, but it seems pretty decent for being 3 minion slots, and would be especially useful against fast bosses such as Pyrogen, the next boss I'll be fighting. This is the fiery version of Cryogen, which inflicts Brimstone Flames and Vulnerability Hex instead of its usual Frost debuffs. On top of that, it will also spawn in Red Devils, with Unholy Tridents dealing 400 180 damage in Master Mode. So you can just expect the amount of damage they deal in Calamity's Legendary Mode. It was insanely brutal, as just 2 mistakes would cost me the entire fight. Something I was contemplating was farming Red Devil banners, which I would assume would help immensely with this fight. However, in the next attempt, I didn't know what occurred in me, but I just went absolutely beast mode. Let me show you just 1 minute of raw, unfiltered Calamity gameplay, so sit back and enjoy. I essentially no-hit this boss and defeated it within a minute, which was awesome. The unique drop from Pyrogen consists of the Blood Flare Core, one of the best post-Moonlord defense accessories. However, it does require you to spec into warding, losing some damage, but with the insane regen and survivability it provides, it was definitely worth it. And with the addition of Pyrogen being defeated, we now have access to dataless equipment and the unlock of the Archmage, though he won't sell me the Cryogetic Staff right now until all the mechs have been defeated. So next up on the list was Medusa. Similar to vanilla Get Fixed Boi, you had to summon all of these at the same time. And yeah, just let me show you Calamity's version. I used my surface arena that I made in pre-hard mode, and whereas the gravity was kind of annoying, the amount of space would be perfect for this fight. With that being said, I did not expect Medusa to look like this. The annoying Destroyer segment was now all shrunk into this monstrosity. But I do have to say, this fight was not bad at all. Yes, I do have post-Plantera gear, and yes, I did die a couple times. But with the Desert Tiger Staff, I completely shredded the Destroyer segment. Going underneath. Wait, Destroyer's already dead? That was so fast. What the hell? Alright, we got this easy. Focus on. And with the hardest part of the boss being defeated, the rest was pretty easy as well. Let's go! I'm the best Terraria player in the world! I do have to say, in my previous attempts, being too far away seems to enrage it in some way, making it quickly dash at you. So for my successful attempt, I stood close to the Destroyer segment, and that seemed to do the trick. Medusa does drop the Bloodworm, which I could use to fight a post-Moonlord boss, but why on earth would I do that? Nothing else was really useful considering the Souls, Hallowed, and everything post-mechs I already had, but one thing that was useful was the Cryogetic Staff unlock, an extremely useful sentry for summoners. Though similar to the Heart of the Elements, it could clutter your screen. With those bosses now being defeated, I spent today doing some maintenance work, extracting some materials, as well as expanding my storage capacity to Hellstone tier and to Hallowed tier, as well as farming the Perforators again for an endless supply of cash. Yep, 500 platinum seems perfectly balanced. With extremely cursed bosses such as the Brimstone Elemental, Pyrogen, and Medusa being defeated, it's now time for some of the hardest bosses so far. Like seriously, this was definitely the hardest part, and I easily spent hours attempting Calamity's clone. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We first have to build the arena. You know the drill. City busters, platforms, candles, heart statues. And then I spent the rest of the day farming for the pumpkin moon again. With my slightly stronger equipment, I did manage to kill some pumpkins and eventually get the Dark Harvest Whip. And as I mentioned before, this has some of the most insane synergy with the Desert Tiger Staff. Now onto Calamity's clone. Let me first start off my rant by saying, you will struggle with this boss. Let me repeat it to you. You will struggle with this boss. Firstly, she will trap you in an escapable box, similar to Supreme Calamitas. This makes dashing away from her brothers insanely difficult, and that's on top of the bullet hells. Don't get me wrong, I quite enjoy bullet hells, but this was definitely a skill issue on my part. We're now halfway. I have rage, which would be nice for her brother phase. Use it now. Oh, I'm just dead. Needless to say, I even had this really close attempt where I had Adrenaline in perfect sync with her brother phase. I was in flow state, even getting a second charge. That's how focused I was. But this did trigger her last bullet health cycle, and I absolutely choked here. And yeah, I did not handle it too well. Come on, we're so close. It's the last bullet hell. No. No. No! Man! What the hell? I'm so bad. I should have had that. I definitely needed a break. So today, I spent some time building. As I've said many times before, I'm not the best builder out there. I had no idea what I was constructing, but hey, that's the fun thing about Terraria and even sandbox games in general. I followed a lot of Chaos's building tips into my own build by first creating these really awesome textured walls, utilizing some bricks and palladium columns painted black. Then I created some additional rooms, and I also really love this little dynasty wood trick with the slanted walls to give the extra bit of detail of supporting the castle. I then built 2 other rooms with varying sizes, just for some more variation, and topped it off with a stack of hay bales on the roof. Ah yeah, let me cook. Is this good or not? And added additional details onto my flooring, with mudstone bricks, stone slabs, and then creating a false foundation. Ever since I saw this building trick, it's always been my go-to to elevate a home from a typical box base. I start off with a base layer of mudstone brick walls, then go back with other materials such as mahogany beams, to give it that illusion of support so the build doesn't look like it's floating. Now it's time for the walls for the main build. Like before, I put a base wall of ebonwood first, then I'll go back and add some additional layers, such as ashwood walls, for nice little sideways beams. I was also really proud of these windows that I made, which consisted of glass walls and actuated glass blocks, hammered in diamond shapes, to create this pretty pattern. As for interior design, nothing like slapping a couple furniture items around to do the trick. Now, the base is looking pretty decent in my opinion, but I wasn't really happy with the roof. Something was just kinda off, so I decided since I was a huge fan of the MURA, my channel is named MURA after all, I decided to make a little buried sword shrine on top. I achieved the Triforce design by placing some gemspark walls behind some hammered blocks, and thought it looked pretty awesome. I know it doesn't make any sense as it should be in the ground, but hey, it's my world and I quite like it. This was followed by making the actual blade itself, which consisted of gemspark walls, with one side painted black to give that extra detail in the shadows. And after finishing up the handle, this was the sword I was left with. I finished off the base with some last minute details and block swapping, and there we have it. No more box homes, now we have a beautiful castle. It may not be a grand build, but it's honest work. So for 200 days, I'll be sure to expand it further. But for now, it was a pretty nice home, and definitely better than what I had previously. I'm back to mining a tiny bit of cryonic ore today, so I could make the ornate shield. This was going to allow me to dash and provide myself immunity frames, which was going to be much needed against Calamitas's brother phase. So with that being said, it's time for the rematch. I used the combination of Wither Blossoms, Plantation, and the rest into the Desert Tiger, and this combination allowed me to get some really nice damage. During the early stages of this fight, I made some pretty fatal mistakes, which in my mind meant it was the end of the attempt and I would just give up. Though I kept on pushing through, and with my Blood Flare core regen, I was able to entirely dodge her second bullet hell phase, and I was definitely entering the zone. And if you played some crazy Terraria mods like me, you'll know what this means. I dodged everything and maxed out my adrenaline, perfectly in sync with her brothers that were going to spawn. And when they did, I unleashed everything I had. As you could see, even with this, the brothers were still able to survive, just showing you the amount of HP they had. But with one of the most annoying phases down, I honestly had no idea what to expect for the rest of the battle. It was really the same fight as Supreme Calamitas, minus the giant meatballs that spawned. Thankfully, I'm quite experienced with these type of bullet hells, and moments later, I finally defeated Calamitas clone. Let's go! Unlocking the Buffed Abyss, Ashes of Calamity, and the Broken Hero Sword. As for unique drops, Calamitas clone actually dropped Ashes of the Annihilation, which was pretty funny as this was an endgame material, though I couldn't craft anything with it as I needed either a Cosmic Anvil or other endgame materials, which I didn't have access to yet. With Ashes of Calamity, I could now make Cause of Calamity and eventually craft Asgard's Valor, easily one of the best dash accessories until post-Providence, granting various debuff immunities, max HP, and allowing you to dash through enemies to gain immunity frames, similar to the Ornate Shield. It's now time to properly move on to the pre-golem phase in progression. Today, let's further explore the temple. It was dark, filled with traps, and wiring was disabled, so nothing special about Calamity's jungle temple. So we'll just skip over to where we eventually make our way into the arena. And since this arena was a super long distance away, but I just made use of the jungle teleporter potion to quickly get back to the arena, as the Rod of Discord is obviously unusable in this seed. And if you aren't a fan of these quality of life mods, the same thing works by using a couple of hoiks and platforms. Anyways, the Golem Temple. I firstly had to spam torches because it was so dark. And this is when a mechanized serpent actually spawned in. This is the armored digger in vanilla Calamity. And according to the wiki, it's actually meant to spawn in post Moonlord. The only other encounter I've had so far was during one of my Calamitas clone attempts, when I died, so I never actually got to see it until now. I didn't expect much from this thing, as normally the looted drops kinda sucks. However, surprisingly, I get Unholy Essence, meaning post Moonlord drops were definitely possible, though unfortunately, I couldn't really craft anything useful out of these, apart from maybe Flask of Unholy Flames. I continue building my arena. A cool trick, since you can't use heart generators inside, is to just place them outside the Golem Temple, and use a Heart Reach potion to extend the pickup range. On to challenging Golem. On this seed, he's extremely small and nimble, jumping all over the place, firing a barrage of lasers. On my first attempt, I did not even last 10 seconds. Now, I know I've spent all this time on Golem, but quite frankly, after 2 attempts at him, I could not have been bothered. How do I even dodge these? Oh my god. I don't even know what's going on my screen. Yeah, I'm just dead. Oh gosh. So we'll come back to him and fight a more useful boss that will give us great loot for now, Ashram Aureus. This boss was surprisingly easy to manage, but don't get it twisted. It does not mean this boss was easy in any way. His curved astral blasts were definitely the hardest part of this fight, as well as the occasional homing UFO attacks. I dropped him to around 128k in 1 minute, so definitely more possible than whatever the cluster golem was. A little more of learning his special AI, and we got this pretty easy. I decided it would be best to expand my surface arena to reach the astral infection. This means mining a tunnel, city bustering, and a satisfying vein mine of the mud walls. Quality of life mods. Amazing stuff. I do have to mention this now. I did use a city buster beneath the astral ore, which is unmineable until post Deus, and it destroyed everything. So let's just pretend this didn't happen and move on with progression. Next up was reconnecting the teleports together, adding some additional platforms, hammering the walls away, and place the arena buffs. You know the drill by now. And through some extensive research of this boss fight, I've come to the conclusion of the following loadout. Side note, swap the spooky wings to something better like Tattered Fairy, reforging all my accessories back into warding, utilizing the Bloodflare core, and swapping back to Hallowed for the useful Shadow Dodge move. This does lower our DPS slightly, however the survivability it provides is 100% worth it. Now onto my successful attempt. This was definitely a hard boss to fight if you don't know exactly what you're doing, as enraging the boss will prove fatal, and being caught off guard during his purple phase can be deadly with the astral lasers fired. For the majority of his early phase, you notice I remain mostly stationary on the ground. Nothing can really get you here, as with each stomp he does, running in a straight line will automatically make you dodge the missiles. And with that, I pop my adrenaline, dropping his health down further. This part of the fight honestly wasn't close at all, so I'm just gonna speed up a bit, though a highlight of this fight was definitely his UFO attack, in which my hallowed dodge blocked out what would have been fatal devastating hit, and I'm pretty sure that would have one-shot me. If I were to fight this boss again, I would probably consider placing actuated astral blocks to expand the biome state and stop him from enraging, as I recall countless times where he would super dash at me, basically destroying me in one hit. So yeah, that's something to consider. From the treasure bag, sadly I did not get the Brillis Bomber, but I did consume the Starlight Fuel Cell, boosting my adrenaline damage and damage reduction. And with Ashram Aureus gone, believe it or not, so many good things unlocked for us. You can go a stealth rogue build with the Fallen Heaven disc, or a mage build utilizing the Asteroid Star, the unique drop from Ashram Aureus. This was actually a post Moonlord weapon that rains devastating projectiles from the sky, but does drain your mana fairly quickly. You can also shimmy this item for 5 Luminite bars, meaning you have all the ingredients to make Nebula armor. However, similar to Ashes of Annihilation, I would need an Ancient Manipulator to craft any of the items, which makes me pretty sad. What you can make, however, is a dual containment unit, meaning Scoria bars and therefore hydrothermic equipment was possible pre-Golem. I decided against this strategy, as honestly I could not be bothered grinding Ashram Aureus another 7 times. For me personally, Summoner was the most comfortable class, and it's been working pretty well so far, and instead we'll be powering up with great loot from the buffed Astral Infection enemies. The Abandoned Slime Staff, Starbuster Core, Hive Pod were all extremely useful summoner equipment, and with that, it's time for the Golem rematch. I'll let the full run play in the background whilst I explain my strategy. Golem likes to jump a lot, so running semicircles and timing your jumps were important. In the first 20 seconds or so of the fight, I barely got hit at all, and was quite impressed with myself considering all the random BS flying across my screen. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, I have no clue what's going on, but it's working, so screw it. Apart from Golem being now completely on crack in phase 2, I don't think much was different about this. It was honestly just me flying around as best I could to dodge. There's nothing much to say, but I did manage to defeat Golem in an amazing time of 49 seconds. Golem is once again a huge milestone, officially unlocking Scoria tier equipment with some insanely difficult bosses coming up. It's been quite a journey so far, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you back for 200 days.